Welcome to our compliance conversations hosted by Insurance Licensing Services of America and Spot On Insurance. Today we'll be covering cybersecurity part 2 because we could not cover it all in part 1. These guys killed it.
So thank you guys for joining us. A lot of you guys know that we started doing this at the beginning of the lockdown, and it was mainly because of my need to be able to see people. I knew that we were going to be going to conferences, and you know, a lot of the people that we see at conferences are like family to us. Especially like in our surplus lines law group, you know, it's a small group, and, you know, I was missing people and I was like, we got to do something. So that is the genesis of these sessions. So thank you for joining us. This is going to be a 1-hour session. If you have a question, write it in the questions and answers section. And Sabrina will be taking care of looking at all of those questions that are coming in.
So today our guest panelists are Paul Feather, CISO for Renaissance Systems, Inc. Welcome. Dennis Logan, Broker Risk Professional Services. Good to have you along, Dennis. Our ILSA panelists are Elaine, Nance, Marketing Specialist. We've got Russ Foster, our GM, and our moderator, Sabrina, Slater, Annuals and Corporates, and Arleen. Did we forget somebody?
No.
Manager Christian Masonette.
And he is going to be taking care of our tech. He made sure that we all sounded great right before we went live. And just before we really get on to today's topic, what I want to do is show everyone where our previous compliance webinars reside on our YouTube channel, so that if you haven't checked them out, you'll know where you can find them.
That's right. I got a question on it just today alone.
So there we have it. That is our YouTube? Yes, that's our YouTube. Compliance Conversations. Those are all of our webinars we've done. We've done on Secretary of State. We've done surplus lines, of course. That's a big thing for us. Affiliations, diligent searches, again, on the surplus line side. And yeah, so that's where you can find them on YouTube. Spot On Insurance. Thanks, Christian. And so today, like Ted said, we are going to be doing cybersecurity part 2. So what do we have in store today, Elaine? You know, if you could just give us a little glimpse of what we'll be chatting, or Sabrina, what will we be chatting about today?
Well, we'll go ahead and start. As you guys know, that this is the second installment. So what I would like for Elaine to do is just kind of give us a brief summary of how last webinar went.
Okay. Well, like I say, in part 1, we were really looking at it more from ILSA side of the street, which is the regulatory compliance. And of course, it's a big trend, has been since probably about 2017, that, you know, we're seeing cybersecurity regulations specifically directed at the insurance industry. It started with New York and their, you know, really, you know, transforming view on cybersecurity regulation for insurance, because it went not just carriers, but all the way down to the individual producer. Then NAIC picked that up and it's continued to expand. And one of the things that I wanted to make sure as we sort of transition to the second part is that the departments of insurance, when they created these regulations, were actually very considerate. They broke it down almost always into, you know, multi-year implementations, and certain tasks were in certain phases. And they sort of broke those phases up by how long they thought it took people to spin up that particular part of the program. But that's not always the order that you want to tackle those steps in to have the most efficient use of your time. And so that's really what we're here for this part today, is to go beyond what's required of you. What do you actually need to how to do to get that program in place so that you can be in compliance with those regulations. So we're really going to get to the nuts and bolts today. But, you know, it started off, you know, for example, in New York, the risk assessment was actually in a later phase. So you had to have your plan in place that reflected your risk assessment before you'd done your risk assessment, if you were going strictly by the timetable the state set. Connecticut, for example, is getting ready. They're rolling out in October of this year, their requirement to have, they're calling it an ISP. It's sometimes called ISP, Information Security Program. I've seen it called WISP, WISP, written program. And they've actually had a reporting requirement since July of 2020. Even though the program that sort of governs how you will report, when you will report, who's responsible in your company to report, doesn't have to be formalized until now.
Very good.
And so that's really what I want to do today. I want to turn it over to our panel of experts who are hands-on cybersecurity to sort of go, you know, what do we need to do and what order do we need to do it in to make the most effective use of our time?
So I'm actually super excited about doing this session because I know that agencies are having to comply with all of these requirements from the insurance departments, but also as organizations within the insurance industry, there's so many new cyber risks that we face. And I know that Dennis will be able to speak on some of those things with us today. So for business owners, agency principals, insurance carrier executives, that's something that for us as an insurance community, every industry obviously is facing new cyber risks, but we just want to talk about our industry, the best industry ever. So I'm excited about that.
Awesome. Well, what we'll do is we'll just start with the questions that we had from last time that we weren't able to address, and we'll just get started. The first question we have is, in states that require it, can I certify compliance if my agency isn't fully in compliance yet?
I'll take that one. Actually, fortunately, most of the states do not have a requirement for insurance agencies and insurance producers to actually file a certification document like you do in New York. In most states, the only people who technically have to file that certificate of compliance are the domestic insurers. But if you do have to file, you can't certify compliance unless you are 100% compliant. There is no partial credit, unfortunately. Now, that doesn't mean you don't want to have as much of it in place as quickly as you can, and maybe reach out to the regulators to explain maybe why you're having a little bit of a delay in complying to a particular point. But don't certify and hope that you'll catch up later on. And those states that don't have that certification requirement, just remember, just because you don't have to file something with the state doesn't mean they're not going to come looking to make sure you're in compliance. So don't let that slip to the back burner amidst all of the many other tasks you have to do in running your business.
Hey, Sabrina, can you hold on 1 second? I am like so super excited. I just looked at the attendees list and I actually have a high school buddy that has joined in. My friend Andrew Burnett is on as an attendee. He's one of my classmates from Brooklyn Tech. Man, from a long, long time ago, from back in the day in Brooklyn. So, hello. And Larry is saying some trash talking going on, penalties for saying, Ted didn't click on it all the way, but he's probably trash talking about being from Brooklyn, but no, he's from Brooklyn as well. So, welcome, Andrew.
Yeah, Larry said penalties for saying you're in compliance if you're not. Those could be jail time.
Mm-hmm.
Is anybody surprised? I'm not. And Andrew, of course, said hello, Arleen. Okay, so our next question, why do companies put off cybersecurity?
Paul, you want to let's take that one.
Yeah. I'll take it from just a simple answer is, one, it's usually related to the lack of resources internal, and a resource could be dollars or personnel or skills. So depending on the level of those three is something that would cause them to put it off for another day, or they would seem to think that we're such a small fish in a big ocean, no one's gonna get, why are there people hacking at us? There's no way. So I get that a lot, and I hear it more often than not that, we've been in business for 35 years. We're in this particular industry. Nobody's looking for us. We don't see our kind of industry in the news, in the headlines. The hackers have better things to do than to come hack at me. So I think that truly they have in their minds these thoughts that would prevent them from going down this path in a orderly fashion to get better cybersecurity or cyber hygiene in their normal daily operations. So I think that sometimes they see it as an expense and not a revenue generating event. So anything that doesn't generate revenue, a lot of business owners will say, you know, that's an expense. I've got to forego that expense because of this other expense or other payroll expense or whatever it might be. But they should allocate some funds to either get an assessment or to get the professional services from a firm to help them identify just the major gaps in their security, cyber-related activities internally. Dennis, I'll pass it over to you to see what you think.
It's a perfect segue. So yeah, I mean, it is an investment on the insurance end of things where, you know, it's not exactly, not everyone has a chunk of cash, you know, sitting around waiting for a new policy to come out that they could buy into. So it's really about preserving what you have, though. So what cyber policies pay for is for someone like Paul to come in, you know, hopefully this is prior to a breach, but especially after, and he'll walk you through all the things you need to do, whether, and then obviously you can contact Elaine as well as far as the things you need to do for sending out notifications via mail, you know, crisis management, attorney fees. All those things really add up really quickly, and the faster you get on it, the faster that you can resolve that issue. And that's where, again, you need insurance so they can align you with those right people instead of trying to call, you know, the lawyer that's on the ad on your way home on the highway that does, you know, if you don't get paid, we don't get paid type of ad. So.
Yeah, I want to tag along on that because one of the reasons that we're doing this sessions and one of the reasons that Elaine is here as a panelist, and some of you might see that she is a marketing specialist with our team. She's been with us for a long, long time. So she's been at different departments, but she is a marketing specialist, but yet she knows the requirements from the Department of Insurance side very, very well. And it's because New York came out with their cybersecurity reporting requirements, and our clients were contacting us left and right. And they're like, how do we comply? What do we need to do? And Elaine and several people were like, we're going to become experts at this and just help you, like from the reporting side. And that's how she quickly became an expert at this.
Mm-hmm. Well, it didn't hurt that New York started telling people to call ILSA either.
Right.
It died. So we have several comments. The first one, of course, is from Larry Shipper. He said, problem is that everyone is attacked all the time. They start with bots that attack every node. So no one is safe. If you think you're not being attacked, you are living with your head underground, which I completely
Ostrich, okay.
And then Tom mentioned that the Verizon breach report for 2020 clearly labels small and medium businesses as targets.
Targets, yeah.
And then last but not least, Lisa mentioned smaller fish may not even understand the data or trust themselves to make data or cybersecurity decisions. They don't have access to affordable, easy to digest instruction or advice, which is one of the great reasons why we're here today.
Yes.
Oh, I have one little thing to add in terms of COVID, guys. Has it added or taken away? Are there more people online trying to break into our every business, or are there less?
More.
More.
There you go. That's what I wanted.
Let's put it this way. I'm sure Paul might have better numbers, but the last one I saw was about $48 to get the ransomware software kit, where it starts mailing out, you know, basically malware to try and take over systems. So the barrier of entry of less than $50. I mean, we all have a little bit of extra time on our hands. It only takes a little bit of bad morals at this point.
Yeah. Okay.
I got to put my kids through college somehow.
That's probably
I actually just got notified about it. Oops, sorry.
The $48 is probably high.
I just got notified by Bucknell University because I guess they use something called Blackbaud software. And so they were breached, and so they had to notify us, which again, it just points to where, you know, the Blackbaud breach wasn't necessarily that bad even for Blackbaud themselves, but that's where the trickle effect comes in. And Bucknell still had to figure out how far they got into it, how much was damaged, what was released, And that all costs man hours on top of even just drafting that email, which was sent to how many thousands of people. So it's just, you want to have someone guiding you in that corner when that comes through.
Paul, you said something about less than 48.
Well, I just know for a fact, one, that breach that you just mentioned was not just that one entity that was affected. There was hundreds of entities. And when you think about those entities, it turns into a large sum of people that were affected. And truly just the notification piece alone was very expensive across the board at all those entities. So, and then the expense associated with a guy going rogue or somebody just saying, hey, let's go see if this works, or a kid or a script kiddie or whatever you want to call them, they're out there and it's cheap. And we've had entities actually put out reports on what the dollar value is associated with the data element collected. So back in the day, we were all talking about social security numbers, or what would an American Express card cost if we could get one with a balance that had a $2,000 balance or a $10,000 balance. Those dollar numbers are now available in the dark web. You can see what the value is of each of those assets that are on the black market for sale. And so when you think about your small businesses, small business owners, sometimes those companies are running pretty thin between, revenue cycles, and they're using things like credit cards, and they're using things like other services for collecting funds from their customers. And so there is an opportunity for theft associated with those particular activities within the enterprise. And it's not that they have a bunch of data elements that are just sitting there stored, but it's the activity that they are a part of, and the data that they touch and use daily becomes very important to the thief that wants to utilize that data elsewhere.
Well, another thing that small and medium business owners don't realize when they're sort of putting off or neglecting working on their cybersecurity is their state may have some serious regulations about notifications and penalties for failure to comply and things like that. They don't have anything to do with insurance at all. It's really about recovery from your breach. And those things can get costly too. You may be forced to pay some fines and penalties. You may be dragged into court. You may be forced to reimburse. You may be forced to do all kinds of things that you did not budget for.
Yes.
And it's going to be way more expensive than the cost of getting a pretty good cybersecurity program put together.
Right.
And one thing too with COVID, what we have to remember is, in addition to the increase in the number of people doing the attacking, we've also had a really basic level of defense stripped away, which was control of physical access. You now have lots of people working from home. Many times those arrangements were made very quickly and sort of, thrown together, just trying to get people up and back to work. And they may not have had the time yet to go through and really evaluate how does that new structure, distributed network, affect the cybersecurity measures we already have in place. Are they still as effective when we've got people using their own systems, people dialing in, not knowing exactly necessarily who else may be able to see equipment if it's sitting, if your 3-year-old crawls on your laptop and decides to hit start delete, what are we going to do there? Things that can just happen that would never have happened when we were all in nice controlled office environments.
Yeah.
A great example of that, Elaine, is you might have your office set up so that people can't connect USB storage to your computers or download anything. But now they're all working from LogMeIn, and guess what? They can drag and drop stuff right onto their desktop at home and do whatever they want with it, which totally bypasses all your well-crafted security. So
exactly.
For more insights on that, Dennis actually did a podcast for us, a bonus episode specifically related to COVID-19 and the increased cybersecurity risk. So he did that for us.
Already.
I know, that was like April 16th that aired. So that
it feels like April 16th of 2016, maybe. Like, I don't know what year it is, but no. And just segue from what you guys were just saying, all of that is covered under an insurance policy. So human error is the biggest cause of claims. It's the biggest issue. It's why there are so many cybersecurity training companies now. I mean, I get calls from them weekly trying to get me to put them onto our carriers to do stuff. So it's just, you have to be aware that human error is what's giving these hackers money. It's not necessarily just your business. It's not necessarily just your class of business, et cetera. It's you or your employees clicking on that fragrant email or sending those emails to the wrong party, pretty much.
I'll throw in one tidbit on insurance. That normally the policies that I've seen that cover specific cyber-related activities, when you start to talk about notifications, Russ, they really don't understand the quantity of data elements that are lost in a breach. And then, so you start to think about, well, our policy is for $3 million. There's no way we'll ever lose $3 million. But it doesn't really mean the dollars lost. It should cover the recovery aspect as well as the notifications, which could be sizable depending on the number of data elements lost within the breach. So it really, you have to kind of calculate it. You have to do some calculations on what is our loss expectancy, what do we touch in an annual period, what kind of policies do we transact on in a monthly period. You know, there's also pieces regarding the lawsuits that could come from those policy holders that you wrote would be filing against you. So it really takes some good information from your carrier, your broker, your agent, to actually walk you through that policy and tell you what these things are for. Because I've had many companies, first thing they say is, well, we have an insurance policy for that. We don't even need to talk about anything, but I got a policy for that. Well, they don't even know what's in the policy to start with. So they don't read their policy. They don't understand what it covers. They don't understand the magnitude of what a breach could mean to their enterprise. And it could mean the difference of being in business and out of business.
Well, especially because they don't take their business model into account either. So there's breaches that are going to disrupt your business. You know, the breaches that we see right now are not typically, unless it's ransomware, it's not typically disruptive to their day-to-day business. They just find out that somebody has gotten into their business. But when you have an attack that actually takes you down, disrupts your ability to continue to work, how much is that costing you every day? Because if that's a big number, the big one that comes to mind is the hack. You know, those guys were losing millions a day, millions a day. It took them a pretty good while to recover from it. So, and I just realized maybe I shouldn't be mentioning people's names on that webinar. But it's, hey, that's news. That's old
for you. We'll beep that out for you, Russ.
Well, the other one that I think is so impactful is when they have attacked hospitals, and so you're in for major surgery. Let's say they're operating on your heart or your brain, and all of a sudden they can't perform surgeries because their whole system is shut down.
I'm working out right after this.
I mean, this stuff, oh my God, my heart is like racing.
You people are trying to scare us.
Oh my goodness.
COVID is running us in.
We have our first questions too, so, from the audience.
Larry says, not going to help, Ted.
So Larry Schiffer wants us to talk about the difference between a cybersecurity plan and cyber insurance and the role of cyber insurance within a cybersecurity plan.
Okay. Can I start that one, if you guys don't mind?
I would love that. Thank you.
So I look at the comparison best, I think, especially small businesses, which is what we're targeting here, kind of align it with auto insurance, right? So if I take the insured as being the driver, that's you, the business being your car, your steering wheel is your operations, and you know, your front bumper is your regulatory, your compliance, your precautionary measures you took with your business, right? So when you get into a crash, auto accidents are a lot easier, first of all, because typically you just have one accident, it happens, you figure it out, you assess, and you go from there. Cyber is a totally different ballgame. Cyber, you go in at first, Paul will tell you after the first week, you know, it might look at, you know, 200K in loss. But then after a month, all of a sudden they figured out that the hacker got deeper, and now you're at 800K. So you don't want to have to deal with, to his point, a cyber policy that is going to nitpick you between what is covered and what is not. So that's where you really have to do, it's really a combination play where that's where your cybersecurity team comes in as your seatbelt, where they're holding you together. They're making sure that, whenever this accident inevitably happens, you're protected first and foremost, then the business, then the car, et cetera, the operations, et cetera. So it's really a team play. One doesn't really work that great without the other. The driver is always in control, so it's about human error first and foremost. So that means cybersecurity training, that means a cybersecurity program, that means cybersecurity hardware, software, et cetera. All these things, especially if you're a small business, I'm sure Paul can refer you to additional clients where there's cut rate costs where, you need to realize what you're losing by going with that cut rate person, but you need to have something, because whenever this inevitably hits you, you want to be covered. You want to have at least some kind of blanket to fall back on instead of being out of your car just sitting on the grass, with it rolled over. Instead, you want to be sitting inside of it with your seatbelt on, airbag properly deployed, your chest not caved in, and properly able to repair it, hopefully.
Yeah, let me add to that the important part of a coverage, when you read your policy, please look for that one-liner that says, as the purchaser of this policy, you're required to do your personal due diligence to protect your assets, whether they be data elements or employees' data or whatever it might be, but you have to do something. What would a prudent man do to protect this company from all types of accidents like fire, theft, cyber, whatever it might be? If you don't do what's necessary, what a prudent man would do to protect their assets,
or woman,
they won't pay the claim. They'll deny the claim. And I hate to say it, but I've seen companies, they just walk around with the policy and say, I'm covered. And then when something happens, they investigate. The insurance investigates. What did you do? Show me your policies. Show me your firewall. Show me your antivirus. Let me see who went to training last. All the things that normal programs have in a cybersecurity program. And if you don't have them in place, it's just an easy checkbox, denied.
Ooh.
Jim Doherty said, what happens when rogue states have access to working quantum computers that can crack 2048-bit RSA encryption? Nothing really will be safe at that point.
Oof.
Correct.
Larry Schiffer said, exactly the point. The insurance policy is just one component. You need to have the comprehensive plan.
Yeah. Your insurance should be your fallback, not your first line of defense.
Correct.
Okay, so you guys have convinced me. Apparently, I need a cybersecurity plan. What do I do first? Tell me. You scared the crap out of me. Now, what do I do now?
I'll take. You want to take that one, Dennis?
Oh, yes, please. So I guess I never explained. So my role as a wholesale broker is I actually work with other agents to help them sell policies. So if that person wants to contact me, I'll refer them to my agent. We'll work together to make sure they're covered entirely, but obviously focused on cyber initially.
Yeah, and I would say this, the big word for like a cyber security program or an information security program, you don't have to get really deep into cyber. Just information security is really what's important. The program that you would create would have specific sections that cover things like backups, user access rights, password policies, disaster recovery, incident response, notifications, all the kind of things that you need to have in place. They're just sections within this particular program, but it's not just a document that you put on the shelf. It's the document that guides your internal folks or your MSP or whoever's helping you from a cybersecurity program to say, these are the things we need to have in place. Can you please help us get this stuff put in place? And it's truly a guidance document. It helps not only your regulators understand, your assessors understand what you have and what you are wanting to put in place and what we can test to make sure that those things are in place. So it's truly just a roadmap or a guidance document that contains multiple sections and or multiple other plans. So you might have an incident response plan. You might have a BCP, business continuity plan. You might have, an authentication related a document that describes how you authenticate to different servers, different online applications. There's even a document related to encryption. What encryption strength do we need and what we should have in place for different assets? How often do we do assessments? So it can be overwhelming, but it's things that we do from day in and day out to help companies put in place, and then slowly and methodically. This is not a one time and you're done. Slowly and methodically put those processes and procedures in place, test them to make sure that they are effective, and then retest every period, whether it's quarterly, annually, but over a period of time, so that you can sleep at night and know that you're protected.
Yeah. It's just like your HR policies, right? Like, our HR policy within I see Russ with your smile. Obviously, our HR handbook has evolved over the 20-something years that we've been in business, right? And it's like what Paul said. You test it. In our case, it's not tested, but someone comes in, messes up something, and there goes your HR policy because you're rewriting that policy. So it's something that should go along with your HR policy, with your protocols for bad weather protocols, like your hierarchy of who do you have to call and all of that. It's something that has to be in place and has
your fire drill.
Yeah.
In case of Texas, Russ, it's the tornado.
There you go. You're talking everything that Paul talked about. There's another layer on top of that. So as a vendor, we get asked to provide all that information to our clients because they're trying to be compliant with their cyber policies.
Yeah.
So it's not just what you have to do to protect yourself. If you use an outside vendor that has access to any of your data, you got to make sure they're doing the same thing too. And that's another thing that a claim is probably going to look at is, did you vet your vendor? Did they provide the information that they're supposed to provide? I've been doing that all week. Doing vendor assessment. So, and that's the one thing I was thinking about was this webinar is these used to be pretty easy, and I'm going to incriminate myself probably, but I could put down exactly what we're doing and send that off and not worry about it because the people that were looking at it had absolutely no clue what I was talking about. So, but they loved the jargon was there, and they oh yeah, it says encryption and there's IPs and things and interwebs and so they were happy. Now I've got these people coming back and say, okay, well you answered this question, but we want to know more. You're going to have to give us a little bit more than just we do that. So so they are the people that are paying attention are paying a lot better attention, which I find very helpful for people in our industry.
Russ, because they have a bigger geek squad than what we have.
They do now. They don't have bigger geeks, though.
No, we've got the best and the biggest geeks, yeah.
Well, one thing, too, I think we always have to remember, too, the first place where you want to start with any of this is that risk assessment. To go through, to know what do you have in place, what kinds of information are you working with? What systems do you have? What protections do you have in place now? So to get that snapshot that identifies what your risks are, because that's going to inform sort of how much security you need. Where do you need to, what steps do you need to take first? What are your most vulnerable areas? Because it's so unique to even talking about insurance agencies. There's a certain commonality of information, but how companies do things varies from company to company, and their needs, it's not going to be a one-size-fit-all plan there. And you want to make sure you've got the right things protected, but you also don't want to be over investing in an area that maybe is a very low risk area for you. And it always amazes me, particularly with legacy systems that so many insurance agencies and companies have, people may not even realize they still have stuff out there running in the background that nobody probably touches, but it's still there, and it could still potentially be a vulnerability.
One of my carriers actually does a vulnerability test with their quotes, and that's one of the most common things they pull is that people will have, whether old remote logins or something like that are out there that people don't realize are just a URL. Like anyone can technically type that in and get to that page. It's just, how well is your security nowadays? So
Absolutely. Very true.
Well, one of the main questions, or one of the last questions that came in, Paul, you already did a great job of answering that. It was, so I have a plan, it's in a binder on my shelf, is that enough? As you mentioned, it is not. That's something that definitely needs to be tested and looked at and improved on, and as the years go by. So just wanted to make sure we didn't miss that question, but we did answer it.
And Paul said really like quarterly. So every few months you should be testing it and refreshing it. And there's new ways that people get into systems. So yeah, it's.
Yeah.
There's new ways and then there's old ways. One of the things in your plan has to be training. You got to teach your people, because the oldest and most consistent vulnerability is everybody inside all of your well-crafted walls.
Yeah, that is true. And I think there has been a lot of push towards doing these assessments. There's different types of assessments. There's technical assessments against different hosts, against the firewall for vulnerabilities and things of that nature. But internally, all your employees should be aware of the procedures and things that are put in place to help protect them and help them understand, not to click on links, those kind of simple things. But those are a part of your cyber, or what I would call information security plan. You have, like you said, a handbook, an HR handbook that people, acceptable use policy, so they can actually understand what's acceptable and what's not. There is consequences for that. So very interesting that a lot of companies, like you said, will put it on the shelf but do not test it. But some of those can be automated tests that occur quarterly. I have clients that are testing weekly because of the nature and size and scope and the interaction between the applications and their customers is so heavy that if something was introduced through programming, they wouldn't know about it for 3 or 4 months. That would be disastrous, because literally. So they look at things on a weekly basis.
And I don't know, maybe this is already a question that you guys already have, but I would like to ask Paul a question. Right now, with everyone, or a majority of people working from home, are you seeing that clients are doing something differently with testing their systems, or is it kind of like, well, everyone, this is where we are, people are working from home, and with that comes additional risks?
It is adding risk. Yes, there is a huge risk by working from home. You lose your perimeter. A lot of companies are going to what's called a no perimeter company, right? Zero perimeter. So work from home means you can work from anywhere. And so what they're trying to do is put more and more controls at the laptop or at the PC to protect the enterprise, maybe through an authentication into a remote server or something of that nature, but truly doing security with a device or a tool to check the compliance of that laptop or that workstation, and making sure that the patches are being applied, that antivirus is in place, personal firewalls turned on, some of the simple things. And then also enforcing some of the new technologies like multi-factor authentication. Those can also, just the hackers are really good. So I know a lot of hackers that break multi-factor authentication, no problem. So even with that in place, it helps just keep you become not a low-hanging fruit. And so therefore they're going away from you because you have multi-factor. Depending on who that person is, multi-factor could be a target. And there's other kinds of, out-of-band type authentication, things that can be put in place depending on the risk. Some of these are expensive. So if the risk is not that high, you might not deploy some of those other technologies to prevent, add more security layers. But true.
Paul, what do you mean when you say multi-factor might be a target? Like it could be.
So if you're the CEO of a company,
Good question, Bill.
and I know for a fact that you have to approve all wire transfers.
Sweating here.
Yeah, and I know for a fact that I'm shooting at you. It's spear phishing. I'm in on your machine. I'm watching you from now for the next couple of months, and I know you have a trip booked to Jamaica next month. So you're on a flight for 9 hours or 4 hours or whatever. I'll do my ploy while you're in the air and force one of your administrators to send me some money via an.
We've seen that one.
Yeah.
We've seen that one.
It happens. So multi-factor, this whole concept with multi-factor is to try to not just have username and password.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just the next step. The next step after that is no passwords, password-less. So there's now things in place to where man-in-the-middle attacks cannot be deployed against a user between their system they're authenticating to, because once that password's used, it's gone. Can't use it again. So there are some really great technologies out there. They're expensive and they do work, but they prevent or eliminate that man-in-the-middle. I'm watching this person, with a keystroke logging at somebody's laptop. It doesn't matter. You can watch all day. You can watch me type in the letters. I'll write it down for you and give it to the hacker, and it's only a one-time use password. Mm-hmm. So there are technologies that are trying to prevent some of this going on while we're, work from home.
We have special defenses against that specific attack, though, because our accounting people look at that and say, that's not Arleen. These words are misspelled.
That's right. It's not going to have a typo if it's coming from me. Heck no.
What brings up a really important situation is, we've always, it's sort of, standard wisdom in IT that, your biggest vulnerability is your people. But, there's a component for employee education in these requirements. And it's so important because you can turn your team into not a vulnerability, but an asset by providing them with a lot of training that is regularly based, not 1 year, 30-minute seminar where you cram everybody in the training room and zip through it, but, continually reminding people and really building a culture that is cyber aware, so that when somebody sees, and we have it, I have to compliment Russ, we really have that here at ILSA. When somebody sees an email that just looks peculiar, maybe it's an invoice that they weren't expecting to have come in, all of us know, first thing we do is send it to our ops people and say, hey, check this out. Does this look legitimate? We know of some ways to check it, but we always go back and do that. And it's like, people know when the system is being slow. People can see, when they're getting strange emails or things that don't seem to make sense, and just to tell them, sort of see something, say something culture, that you can do that and, let people help you protect your data because they're the ones using it daily. They can tell when something's gone wonky with the data.
Yeah, and the crazy thing about it is, they're sending out these emails, but you can also tell and see how much they're looking at your stuff because they get better as time goes on. They look more, oh, this looks more legit. They're getting good, It's crazy how much you can really see that they're watching you. The last one said, hey, send me money, but this one says, hey, can you pay this invoice? Because, we deal with invoices all the time. It's really crazy how, improved they've got on trying to get that stuff out of you.
And again, talking about COVID-19, another thing, and it just really, hurts my heart to see it. One of the common scams they're doing now is people saying, we have relief money. We have, information about COVID test results that, trying to get people to click on these links or to provide information by playing on the fears that people have.
Yep.
And to Elaine's first point, if you're, especially to the agents out there, if you're focused on cybersecurity, cyber awareness, cyber insurance policies are really easy to quote, submit and bind, and they only start at $400. So they're a great option for a lot of the smaller businesses that maybe can't afford some of the top tier preventative measures Paul mentioned. But and on more than anything, I think it's a great way to really establish yourself as a standalone agency, whether it's through cyber specifically or just having that in your back pocket as a extra little card to play whenever you're competing against that big retailer that has a couple other extra resources. So I think it's a great thing to specialize in. I personally love it because the claims are nuts. Like I saw yesterday, a company lost $6.9 million in 20 minutes based on basically high trading emails. It's like, I don't know how you could go without a policy. Like, it's just terrifying.
Yeah.
Mhm.
The other thing, to just go on with what Dennis is saying, so if you're not a big organization and you can't afford, a comprehensive service, let's say like an RSI today, right? But like you said, start with a small policy. But I would just like kind of do like little hacks, like just keep in touch with like, what are they posting? Like, what are they doing for the bigger companies? And start taking some of those takeaways until you can afford a comprehensive service like that, right? So that's definitely like a go around, like a nice hack. It's just go out there, go onto YouTube, check out what these companies are doing for the biggest organizations in the world.
Yep.
And there are also a lot of free webinars out there. I'm getting them because, of course, I put a lot about cybersecurity out there. I don't think a day's gone by when I haven't gotten an offer, and most of them are free. And it's just sort of, it's making you aware of what are the current threats, what are some of the current technologies. Take advantage of those resources.
To that point, though, be careful of those. They'll say it's a free, assessment, enter your password here, and then all of a sudden,
We just assessed your system.
Right, it failed miserably.
Paul, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say that we have done what we call discovery calls, just phone calls with anybody, any size company, size or shape, any size, and just discuss some of the risks that are present in that type of company.
Yeah.
So that's truly with either an operations person or the owner of the firm or something of that nature, and just simple things. Cyber hygiene doesn't have to be expensive. It just needs to be put in place so you can operationalize it and take advantage of everything that we've mentioned here today to try to prevent some of this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I know a lot of companies, they don't even, it's like wash your hands, right? So we're all doing the wash your hands and wearing face masks, but there's a lot of companies, they're not washing their hands. They're not wearing face masks, and it's going to be disastrous, right? So just having those conversations, we have them all the time. Trish, I think Trish is on the call today. She's had so many of those calls and said, "Hey, Paul, just join this call." And it's just on and on and on. And it's very informative for the company. We help them kind of get started down that path. It's not a huge expense, but it gives them what we call a roadmap, right? That they can start to see, I'm on a roadmap. I now know I'm going in the right direction. And I think if you have that comfort to know that you're at least going down the right path, you're more likely to be able to say, I did what I should be doing to even, have a claim on a policy that you purchased.
But it's interesting that you mentioned that about those companies, because have they not ever heard of lawsuits?
Well, a lot of them are flying by the seat of their pants.
That's just unreal that, there are people getting sued all over the place because they're not taking the actions that they need for COVID, just like we're talking about security here.
Mm-hmm. Yep. My dad says it's a key to the courthouse. So automatic, key to the courthouse, let's go have a lawsuit. So everybody's very litigious now. It's not just companies against companies. It's your clients and customers against customers, against your, business. So, if you're not protecting not only your assets, but the assets of those customers and clients, it could be a pretty easy, quick lawsuit, key to the courthouse.
And to your point, not necessarily quick. The lawsuits that have been happening as far as like notification costs or privacy violations now, like the one out of California, that's going to be at least a 3-year lawsuit before they even come to any kind of relative conclusion. So that's defense costs before you even talk about doing anything actually wrong. Mm-hmm. So it's just, like I said, I think everyone should have a policy. Additionally, policies do cover that regulatory cost as well. So if, they find out, like I said, there is always that gray area and you need to review policy language per blah, blah, blah. But whenever you get to that point, there's a limit for whenever a state were to fine you for not properly protecting the insured's data, which again, to Paul's point, I mean, what is proper protection, right? Like how far can a person go before that other person doesn't sue? Nowadays, we can sue for literally everything. You know, whether you keep it in Fort Knox or you keep it in a shoebox, they can still sue you and say that, well, you didn't properly protect it.
Yeah. So Dennis, just give us a ballpark. Like, you know, you're talking about defense costs for 3 years. What are we looking at? And Larry, I know that you're out there. If you want to, like, from your side, on the legal side, throw in that amount right there on the chat and share it with us.
So I don't have the details on that one. They have a $10 million demand. I know that. But the defense costs, I mean, it really varies by state. I would say the most common limit blowing situation is what Paul said with notification costs, where I think especially a lot of the, I don't want to say smaller, but maybe not experienced carriers maybe stepped in a little bit too quickly and didn't realize how much they were biting off when they were giving these policies for, you know, X dollars. And those notification costs, you know, some states it's $15, some states it's $3. And no matter what, it adds up very quickly whenever you're talking about mailing something out. And that's, again, before you even look at assessing whether if you have to pay the ransom, if you have to repair systems, if you have to just everything else that comes with a claim.
So the notification costs are one of the...
That's the biggest thing. I equate that to like general liability whenever insurers kind of come in not knowing what they're looking for. They just want liability insurance sometimes. You know, I say that's one of the biggest umbrellas, or not, well, I guess not a good umbrella, but kind of stone over your head that people don't realize when they're doing business. So a business can quickly get to, you know, having 100,000 transactions in a year, you know, give or take, before they become technically a big company. But every single one of those transactions, you can have to pay a notification cost on. So unless you made 100,000 per customer, you're going to be looking pretty tight whenever it comes time to pay $15 per person per se.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and Larry did answer. He said, but to defend the case, you're talking about potentially millions if it is a large company with a serious breach.
Oh, yeah.
Just to defend the case.
That's another point, too. I personally always tell my insurers, and when you can obviously afford it, so back to the car analogy, you know, if you only have 3 wheels, you know, maybe you don't want to scale up and put a spinning rim on the front right one or something like that. But whenever you have that extra capital, you want to secure a good relationship with an attorney as well. So a cyber attorney preferably, but just some form of attorney so that way you have someone to call before you call me. Because there are certain different things that you have to say to properly articulate your claim to make sure that you're not screwing yourself out of coverage or screwing your employees out of coverage, what have you, because one of the things coming out of London is, as Paul said, if you're not doing the proper things for security, the policy might not pay out. In London, their cybersecurity standards are much higher than ours are, and we're getting there now. Yeah. Like there's a case where an employee was fired because she didn't listen to those cybersecurity standards. And I believe, and they didn't say this directly, but I think it's an issue where the cyber insurer was not willing to pay unless they basically remedied that situation by letting that employee go, which turns into another thing that I handle, which is employment practices liability. But that's a whole different claim on that side. But it's one of those things where you want to have an attorney, you want to make sure you're doing the right things, at least by the letter of the law as best as you can, whatever letter that is this week. We don't really know, but you know, that's why you got to keep Paul and Elaine in your corner as well.
But Dennis, just to go on that, because I love like real life examples. So on that case, when you're talking about that, the insurer was kind of suggesting or kind of like said, you know, get rid of this person. You're not talking about like a staff person, right? You're talking like maybe a chief information officer, something like that.
She was in accounting. Yeah, so she was an accounting person. She transferred, I believe it was about $242,000, somewhere in that range, to an errant email, basically. And
oh my gosh,
I'm not saying that the insurer said that. I can't say that by any means, but the way that the story read to me, it was like, I don't see why you would have let this person go and cause this big of a fuss versus if the carrier should have been paying it from the start, kind of deal.
It seems like that's just like such an E&O issue.
Yeah. That's why it crosses over. Like I said, that's why I think cyber is a great policy that, you know, it does not cover professional liability. That's a tech E&O policy. There's a thin line between those two kind of things. And I can gladly go into details about that. But yes, it does cover that situation because it is technically an error where they're sending money to the wrong person. That's because that person was tricked by a hacker.
Oh my gosh. Russ, you know, my head wants to spin right now, right?
I shouldn't have let her have.
This is the stuff I didn't tell you guys so you could sleep at night.
Oh my
I
gosh.
shouldn't have let her drink coffee before this event. She's getting
Oh.
more and more hyper.
Going back to the very beginning, though, you know, one of the reasons why small businesses and medium businesses are complacent is because they don't feel that urgency. They don't feel that fear. They're not out of their comfort zone until they are. And then it's too late. You have to kind of use scare tactics to really get their attention. You have to show them real life examples. You have to, you know, they have to see on the news. When you see it on the news that Target got hacked, you know, that's kind of bad because you're like, whoa, when did I go to Target news? But when you see that the guy 2 blocks over got hacked, then it's in your neighborhood. And then you start thinking about what about me? Well, that's really what gets people motivated.
Sorry, that's hilarious that you would say Target and 2 neighborhoods over. So Target was a hack, was it 2016? The breach was caused by an HVAC, basically a AC contractor that was in Sharpsburg, which is about 2 neighborhoods over from Pittsburgh, where I grew up. So it's like, that is a very true case where that, I mean, unfortunately that business did go out of business and they were held liable for some of those costs. I mean, Target obviously absorbed because they were the bigger entity of it. And that's even because Verifone, which is actually the credit card company of Target, like I said, that's where claims get really complicated. But yes, you can absolutely be that guy 2 blocks down the street and technically be liable for a Target breach.
Yeah. I'll throw in one more thing on that one topic. It's called third-party risk management. Mm-hmm. And so that HVAC contractor was a third-party provider or vendor to Target. And just some of the systems between those 2 companies, the behemoth of Target and the small company that's the HVAC company, the systems between them, the communications channel was there and open. And the guy that got hacked was the HVAC contractor, not Target, right? So the hack occurred at the HVAC vendor. They used a system that they had access to inside of Target to get into Target, look around, and steal credit card numbers. Mm-hmm. So that's what, you know, you think about this.
Okay. Yeah. I want clarification from both of you, Paul and Dennis. So they actually targeted that HVAC company, that HVAC company, like they knew that the HVAC company? No,
what happens is that's that small company. I'm talking about all companies, small, medium, whatever, are a target for hack. Mm-hmm. And so what happens, the hacker comes in and looks around and says, oh, this is a small HVAC company. This guy made $200,000 last year. Big deal. He's got 6 trucks. And they're like, what does this guy do? Buys gas for the trucks, maintenance, blah, 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 and buys Freon. So, and parts. So there's like nothing there. What am I doing? And then he looks on that guy's payables system or receivables system for invoices. And he just happens to see a recurring invoice go into Target. It says, oh, what's going on there? And then he says, that is where I want to go. And he actually backtracks through that system, the EDI system for Target and the invoicing system. So you say, here's my invoice, I'm sending it to Target. And that's how they got inside the Target operations. And from there, they sniff around and found the credit card system that was probably at fault and was compliant. That's the other part. The system was compliant before all of this. Yeah. So your HVAC vendor was just the starting point to go all the way towards the
Dennis, those were your neighbors, 2 towns next to you. Why didn't you go in there and train them?
I can't say I know everyone in Pittsburgh quite yet.
I do have a special announcement to make. This is just a feeling that I get, but you guys have heard of Rambo 1, 2, and 3. It looks like we're going to have Cybersecurity 1, 2, and 3. And we may have and I'm going to tell you guys something. There's so much information that we're giving out here, and I'm hearing that from the folks on the chat as well, that I think we're going to extend some of these a little longer. And if people can't stay for an hour, they can watch it on our YouTube channel, you know, the end of it. But I think we've got to give this a little bit more time because the information, you guys are just so chock full of information, and we just don't want people, we want people to really get this because it's important.
Yeah. And for those of you that,
Go ahead.
and for those of you that are attending, if you think of any questions during the week that you want to send our way, just send those questions to ccquestions@ilsainc.com. Also, if you want to get a hold of Dennis or Paul, you can also just send us an email there and we'll put you in contact with them. So we really appreciate it. Next week, we're going to be covering a topic that I don't think will make my heart race as much. It's going to be continuing education, but there are some really, things, some real deep dives that we're going to be doing on that. So stay tuned in. But yeah, at least I don't think my heart will be racing as much as it has during this session.
Dennis, what were you going to say?
Oh, just to Arleen's point, and iterating Paul's point as well, I think, so I got hit with last week 3 different emails from different logistics companies basically doing the same type of phishing act. So my assumption, and Paul could correct me, is that someone bought some software. That software included a whole bunch of email exchanges. Those exchanges were then sent on a blast to probably this HVAC contractor along with every other one in the surrounding area. And then this poor sap happened to click on that email that had that attachment. And then that's what got them into his system, which got them into target system. So that would be kind of phishing / whaling, where they're really broadly looking for information, but they are smart in how they're targeting and how they're in the end goal of what they're doing. You might be a small fish to them getting to, Lockheed Martin got hacked. Was about a month ago by a company that had 13 employees, I think 260 in revenue. So again, that's a small fish to a very, very, very large fish as far as hacking goes.
Wow. True.
And one thing I'd just like to say is, not quite wrapping this up, but 2, we've talked about the big fish and how the small fish are out there, but the simple truth is that small to medium-sized companies, if they do get hacked, it's much more likely to have a catastrophic effect on the future of that business than it is for one of these, massive multinational corporations. If you're seeing a profit margin of maybe a couple $100,000 a year, something like this literally can put you out of business.
The average ransomware demand
you just can't assume that they're only going after the big guys.
What was that?
The average ransomware demand right now is about 200K. When you include all classes, I believe it's about 63K though, when you look at the smaller businesses. So again, that means they're not looking to necessarily put insurers out of business, because the best fish is a repeat fish. If you can go out and catch them again next year, that's a great thing for you. So they're not going to put you out of business. They're going to put you very, very slowed out of business, or just hinder you a bit. And then the other thing I've seen recently too is that you can have DDoS, so denial of service for hire. So I can go right now. I mean, I would never do that, but I can go right now, find someone online, pay them $20 an hour, go attack my next competition as a broker, and hopefully today win out a couple of deals because they couldn't get to their systems. So it's a vicious thing out there.
Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us. Those of you who are in our chat, thank you for taking part of it and making it all come to life with your questions. This topic obviously is getting a lot of attention outside of here, but with what you guys are saying, it is a very, very interesting topic. I think we hit on some fire here, and we want to do this again. So we look forward to having you guys back, and I'm sure Sabrina will set the date for the next one.
Thank you to our guest panelists, Paul, Dennis. You guys gave such valuable information. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
And thank you to all of our attendees. Have a great afternoon, guys.
Thank you, everyone. Looking forward to the next Black and White podcast.
Yes.
Have a good one, guys. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.